Harold Finch's arrival at Elias Marlowe's apartment was marked by an unsettling stillness that seemed to absorb every stray sound. The gaunt man, with wild grey hair and trembling hands, looked as if he had been dragged through a storm and left stranded on a desolate shore. His eyes, glassy and darting, betrayed a mind fraying at the edges. Elias, though accustomed to solitude and shadows, felt an immediate pang of discomfort, a dark prelude to the chaos that Harold would soon unleash. "You don't understand," Harold whispered shortly after removing his threadbare coat, his voice a brittle thread barely holding together. "It's not just the deaths. It's the watching, the waiting, the knowing. The mirror, it doesn't just show who's next. It burrows inside you. It eats at your mind until there's nothing left but fear." Elias studied him closely, noting the twitch of Harold's lip and the way his fingers trembled as he clutched an old leather-bound notebook. "Tell me everything," Elias urged softly, a mixture of curiosity and dread tightening his chest. Harold's hands fumbled to open the notebook, revealing pages filled with frantic scrawlings, names, dates, and grotesque sketches of faces contorted with terror. "I tried to escape it," he said, voice cracking. "I thought I could outwit the curse, but it's a parasite. It feeds on your fear, your obsession. The more you look, the deeper it sinks its claws." As the hours passed, Harold's words grew more disjointed, his warnings more desperate. He spoke of shadowy figures lurking beneath the glass, whispers that echoed in the dead of night, and a relentless countdown that no one could halt. Elias listened, torn between skepticism and the gnawing realization that he was sliding down the same treacherous path. The apartment, dimly lit by a single desk lamp, seemed to shrink around them. Every creak of the old building, every flicker of light from the mirror in the corner, heightened the oppressive atmosphere. Elias found himself glancing repeatedly at the mirror, its surface rippling with distorted reflections that teased the edges of his vision. At one point, Harold began sketching furiously on scraps of paper, his trembling hands producing images that seemed to bleed with a life of their own, twisted faces. Shadowy forms and abstract patterns that suggested a malevolent intelligence lurking just beyond comprehension. "It's trying to tell me something," Harold muttered, eyes wild. "But the message is shattered, broken. Like my mind." Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's stale air. "How do you know it's broken?" he asked quietly. Harold's gaze fixed on him, a flicker of clarity piercing the chaos. "Because it's still calling me, still demanding. The curse isn't satisfied until it's claimed its due." Suddenly, Harold's body convulsed, and he collapsed to the floor, clutching his head as though trying to hold his thoughts together. "The final demand," he gasped, eyes squeezed shut. "The sacrifice, it's coming." Elias rushed to his side, heart pounding in a rhythm of terror and urgency. He helped Harold to a chair, his mind racing to piece together the fragmented warnings. The mirror's curse was no longer a distant threat, it was a living, breathing nightmare consuming those who dared to peer beneath the surface. As the night deepened, Elias sat beside the broken man, the weight of the mirror's reflection pressing heavily on his soul. The line between reality and madness blurred, leaving only the cold certainty that the dread they both faced was inexorable. And somewhere, deep within the glass, the shadow of the curse waited, patient and unyielding. Elias knew, with a sinking certainty, that his own descent had only just begun. The clock ticked relentlessly. Outside, the city's muted hum was a distant echo, swallowed by the oppressive silence inside the apartment. Elias pored over the scattered papers Harold had left behind, trying to decipher the cryptic notes and frantic sketches. Each symbol seemed to pulse with a dark energy, a language of fear written in desperation. Mara's words from days earlier echoed in his mind. Knowledge was a double-edged sword. The more he sought to understand the mirror, the more entwined he became in its malevolent web. Harold's collapse was a grim testament to the cost of such forbidden insight. Elias's fingers brushed against the mirror's cold frame as he rose, the surface flickering with a spectral glow. In its depths, He glimpsed not his own reflection, but faint shadows, whispers of the curse's eternal hunger. He shivered, the dread coiling tighter around his heart. A sudden knock at the door startled him. Detective Rowan's skeptical yet concerned face appeared, breaking the suffocating solitude. Elias hesitated, then opened the door, knowing that the nightmare they faced was growing beyond the confines of his private obsession. "We need to talk," Rowan said, stepping inside. "The pattern's worse than I thought." Elias nodded, steeling himself for the long, dark road ahead. The mirror's grip was tightening, and the descent into madness far from over. The chapter closes on Elias standing before the mirror once more, his pale face reflected back with a haunted intensity. Behind the glass, shadows shift and twist, promises of death, despair, and the inexorable pull of fate. The dread is palpable, a living thing that threatens to consume him whole. As Harold's broken warnings echo in his mind, Elias realizes that the true horror is not what the mirror shows, but what it does to those who dare to look. The descent into madness is only beginning. The faint glow of the solitary desk lamp threw long shadows across Elias Marlowe's cramped apartment, illuminating a chaotic sea of papers, sketches, and hastily scribbled notes. His thin fingers trembled as they hovered over the ornate, cursed mirror that stood like a monolith on the battered wooden table. The glass itself seemed to breathe beneath the flickering light, faces shifting and melting into one another, reflections that refused to obey the laws of the present moment. Elias's eyes, bloodshot and rimmed with exhaustion, darted from one distorted visage to another. The mirror did not show him any more, not really. Instead, it offered glimpses of those doomed to perish next. Each reflection was a harbinger, a cruel oracle whispering the fate that awaited. The knowledge clung to him like a second skin, suffocating and relentless. He had become a prisoner in his own mind, a solitary sentinel watching death's parade through a glass that knew no mercy. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, the strands coarse and dry from neglect. The apartment was silent, except for the low scratch of his pen against paper and the occasional creak of the aging building settling in the night. Outside, rain pattered softly against the windows, a mournful rhythm that echoed the dread tightening around his chest. The boundaries between reflection and reality had begun to dissolve. Sometimes, when Elias stared too long, the mirror's surface rippled, as though liquid rather than glass. Shadows flickered beneath the ornate frame, distorting into shapes that defied logic, glimpses of a shadowy figure lurking just beyond the veil, the dark force animating the mirror's curse. The air grew heavier with each passing hour, as if the mirror exhaled a cold breath that seeped into his bones. He remembered Harold Finch's warnings, the frail man's haunted eyes, the tremble in his voice as he recounted his descent into madness. Elias feared he was following the same path, the creeping madness that the mirror whispered into his soul. Yet he could not stop. Every reflection was a puzzle piece, every death a clue. He had to understand. He had to find a way to break the cycle before more lives were claimed. A soft knock at the door jolted him from his spiraling thoughts. His heart hammered violently in his chest as he hesitated, the paranoia whispering that even the smallest intrusion might herald disaster. After a long pause, the knock came again, more insistent. "Elias, it's me, Mara. I need to see you," came the voice from the other side, steady, concerned, a tether to the world outside his descent. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Elias moved to open the door. Mara Voss stepped inside, her sharp eyes quickly taking in the disarray. The faint scent of rain clung to her coat, mingling with the stale air of the room. "You look worse," she said softly, stepping further in. "You've been holed up here for days." Elias's lips twitched in a weak smile. The mirror, it's changing, the reflections there more volatile. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on." Mara approached cautiously, her gaze flickering to the mirror. The glass shimmered unnaturally, faces morphing in violent succession. "We need to find a way to sever the curse," she said firmly. "There has to be something in the texts. I found something we missed." Elias nodded, grateful yet wary. The knowledge Mara brought was a lifeline, but he feared it was only a matter of time before the mirror's grip tightened beyond escape. That night, as Mara pored over ancient manuscripts, Elias sat glued to the mirror, his hands shaking as he catalogued every shift and flicker. The faces appeared faster now, their eyes pleading, accusing, resigned. He felt the weight of inevitability crushing him, the mirror's curse waving tighter around his soul. The whisper came again, barely audible but unmistakable. Elias leaned closer, breath fogging the glass. A shadow twisted beneath the surface, a dark figure just out of focus, beckoning him deeper into the nightmare. His obsession had become a prison. The mirror was no longer merely a window, it was a trap, a predator feeding on his fear and isolation. And Elias knew with a chilling certainty that the next reflection might be his own, but still, he would fight. Even as the mirror's grip tightened, he clung to the fragile hope that knowledge could be a weapon, not just a curse. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming a relentless dirge that matched the pounding of his heart, a herald of the darkness yet to come. The night stretched on, thick with dread and determination. As Elias Marlowe stood watch beneath the skin of the mirror, caught between reflection and reality, life and death. The cramped study was heavy with the scent of old paper and lingering dust. The air thick with the weight of centuries as Mara Voss flipped through fragile pages, yellowed with age. The flickering candlelight threw erratic shadows across the walls, illuminating cryptic symbols and intricate drawings of mirrors, each sketched with meticulous care by hands long vanished from the earth. Mara's sharp eyes narrowed as she traced the arcane inscriptions, her fingers trembling slightly from a mixture of cold and anticipation. "Look at this, Elias," Mara murmured, her voice low and reverent. "This manuscript dates back to the late 16th century. It speaks of mirrors crafted to reveal the true nature of the soul, artifacts of great power and dangerous truth." Elias leaned closer, his pale, gaunt face shadowed by the uneven candlelight. His deep-set eyes, rimmed with the exhaustion of sleepless nights, scanned the faded script. "And this mirror," he whispered, "it was one of those." Mara nodded slowly, her fingers gently brushing a detailed illustration of a mirror framed in twisted vines and eyes. "Yes, but there's more. Somewhere along the way, these mirrors were corrupted. Twisted by dark magic, their purpose perverted. Instead of revealing truth, they became oracles of death, instruments that foresee the inevitable end, binding fate and fear into a single reflection." A chill wind rattled the window panes, as if the very room responded to the dark revelation. Elias swallowed hard, the hairs on the back of his neck prickling. "So the mirror isn't just cursed," he said, voice barely audible. "It's feeding on fear and locking people into this cycle of death." "Exactly," Mara replied, eyes wide with the gravity of the knowledge. "The curse isn't just a superstition. It's a living force, sustained by dread and the inevitability it enforces. Those who gaze into it see not themselves, but the next soul destined to perish. And once the reflection appears, the fate is sealed." Elias's hands clenched into fists. "But why? Wasn't it supposed to show the true self?" Mara's gaze darkened. "The original mirrors were created by an enigmatic order seeking to strip away falsehoods and reveal hidden truths. But dark forces, perhaps jealous or fearful of such knowledge, corrupted the craft. The magic twisted, and the mirrors became harbingers of death, binding the viewer's future to a fatal reflection." The room fell silent save for the crackling candle flame, the oppressive weight of history pressing down on them. Elias's mind raced the faces he had seen, the deaths that followed. The fragile thread of hope he'd clung to now seemed thinner than ever. "Is there any way to break it?" he asked, voice hoarse. Mara closed the tome carefully, her expression grave but resolute. "If the curse feeds on fear and inevitability, then perhaps breaking it requires severing that cycle. But the text warns that the price is high. The mirror demands sacrifice, a final toll to maintain its power." Elias swallowed, the cold dread settling like stone in his chest. "So we retrapped," he said quietly. bound by a curse that can only be undone through sacrifice. Trapped, but not yet defeated, Mara said firmly. Knowledge is a double-edged sword. It curses, yes, but it also lights the path forward. We have to find that path before the mirror claims another life, maybe even yours. Outside, the wind howled through the old city streets, carrying with it the echoes of countless souls ensnared by reflections that revealed not who they were, but how and when they would fall. Beneath the layers of dust and time, the cursed mirror waited, patient and unyielding, a silent sentinel of fate's inescapable grasp. The night deepened around them, the candle's flame sputtering, as if warning of the darkness still to come. And as Elias looked toward the ancient text, the shadows beneath the glass seemed to pulse, a heartbeat of dread echoing from the past, reaching forward to claim the future. They had uncovered the mirror's twisted origin, but that revelation was only the beginning. The true horror lay in what came next, confronting the relentless force that had ensnared so many, and finding a way to shatter the reflection before it shattered them all. And so, beneath the watchful eyes of history and shadow, Elias and Mara prepared to face the cursed truth, darker and more terrible than either had imagined. The mirror's grip was tightening, and the echo of death was growing louder still, promising that the next reflection would not be the last. The dim light of Elias' cluttered study flickered and danced against the ornate frame of the mirror, casting long shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. He sat rigid, fists clenched on the table before him, eyes locked on the glass. For days, the mirror had haunted his thoughts, its cruel revelations gnawing at the edges of his sanity. Tonight was different. The reflection that rippled before him was no stranger's face. It was hers. His sister's face, pale and marked with an expression of raw terror, filled the glass. Her eyes, wide and shimmering with unshed tears, bore into his soul as though pleading for salvation. Elias' breath caught in his throat. The room seemed to contract around him, pressing in with suffocating weight. His heart hammered, a deafening drum in the silence. "No," he whispered, voice cracking. Not her. The world outside his window was still, the faint hum of the city at night a distant murmur. Yet inside a storm raged, an unbearable dread that twisted his insides. He reached out tentatively, fingertips brushing the cool surface of the mirror, but the glass remained unyielding, unchanging. The reflection persisted, unblinking, as if daring him to defy the truth it bore. Desperation propelled Elias to action. He grabbed his phone, hands trembling as he dialed the number he'd memorized years ago. The line rang, each chime a hammer blow to his hope. When her voice finally came through, warm and unsuspecting, a fragile thread of relief sparked within him. "Sarah," he said, voice low and urgent. "Listen to me carefully. You need to be careful. There's something wrong, something dangerous. Elias." "What's going on?" "You're scaring me," she replied, concern threading through her words. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "I saw you in the mirror, the one I bought. It shows who will die next. And it's you, Sarah. You have to be careful. Please trust me." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then softly, "I'll be careful, I promise. Just don't worry so much." The call ended, but the knot in Elias' stomach tightened. He knew better than to trust hope. The mirror's curse was relentless, a merciless force beyond reason or will. He needed help. Mara Voss's door was answered with hurried knocks, her sharp eyes quickly reading the urgency etched into Elias' face. After a brief explanation, they pored over books and ancient texts, searching for any fragment of knowledge that might offer a way out. Hours slipped away in fevered research, the weight of the curse pressing heavier with each revelation. The mirror was no mere object. It was a conduit, a prison for dread and inevitability. Rain began to fall as Elias and Mara stepped into the night, the city transformed into a slick maze of shadows and reflections. Every sound was amplified, the splash of tires on wet pavement, the distant wail of sirens, the hurried footsteps of the desperate. They raced against time, hearts pounding in a rhythm of fear and hope. Elias' mind spun with possibilities and grim certainties. Could he change fate? Could he save her? Their search led them to a narrow alley, a place where light and shadow wove a tapestry of menace. There, in the chill of night, the echo of footsteps alerted them to danger. Elias' sister appeared, breathless and wide-eyed, a flicker of terror crossing her face. From the darkness emerged a figure, sinister and silent. Elias' protective instinct surged as he stepped forward, voice fierce and commanding, breaking the spell of dread that had gripped the moment. The figure hesitated, then vanished into the night, leaving behind a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the world. Relief washed over Elias, mingling with the residual terror. The curse had not claimed her yet, but the mirror's grip was tightening. Each reflection brought them closer to an abyss from which there might be no return. As dawn approached, Elias knew the battle was far from over. The mirror had shown him the next victim, but whether fate could be altered remained a question suspended in the cold light of day. And beneath the skin of the mirror, the shadows whispered on, waiting. The night had not ended, it had only deepened. The heavy silence of the antique shop was broken only by the faint, uneven rhythm of Elias's breathing as he stood before the mirror. The ornate frame, carved with twisting vines and faces frozen in silent screams, seemed to pulse in the dim light. His fingers trembled as he reached toward the glass, the surface unnervingly still. But then, as if the mirror had been holding its breath, the reflection shifted. The face that stared back at him was not his own, at least, not the Elias he knew. The eyes were his, but hollow, shadowed by an overwhelming wariness and fear that chilled him to the bone. The visage was pale, almost translucent, the skin stretched tight over gaunt cheeks. It was his face, yet marked unmistakably as the next to die. A cold sweat broke across Elias's forehead, his heart hammered against his ribs as the mirror's surface rippled like dark water disturbed by a stone. The room around him seemed to fade, the edges blurring until all that remained was the terrible certainty in that reflected gaze. "No," he whispered, a desperate plea lost to the oppressive air. The shadows deepened, pooling beneath the glass as an unnatural chill filled the room. From the depths of the mirror, a shape began to coalesce, a formless darkness, shifting and writhing as if alive. It was the curse itself, the malevolent force that had haunted Elias's every waking moment, now manifesting in a shadowy figure whose presence pressed down on him with suffocating weight. The figure's voice slithered into his mind, a whisper both ancient and cruel, promising the inevitability of death and the futility of resistance. Elias staggered back, but the pull of the mirror was irresistible. His fingers brushed the glass, and the chill that surged through him was like ice seeping into his bones. Suddenly, visions exploded behind his eyes, fleeting images of his own demise. A fractured street, a sudden fall, the cold embrace of darkness. Each scene flickered with terrifying clarity, blurring the line between memory and prophecy. Panic clawed at him, but beneath it stirred a stubborn ember of defiance. This was not merely a reflection, it was a challenge. He would not be consumed without a fight. Summoning every ounce of will, Elias fixed his gaze on his own haunted reflection, willing the fear to subside. The shadow beneath the glass writhed in fury, the surface cracking with sharp, spiderweb fractures that splintered the images within. The battle was both internal and otherworldly, his mind wrestling with terror and doubt, his soul grappling with the dark force seeking to claim him. The mirror's curse lashed out with whispers of despair, but Elias held firm, voice trembling yet resolute as he spoke into the void. "I am not yours to take." Shards of glass shimmered in the dim light, each fragment reflecting a fractured self-fear, hope, anger, and sorrow entwined in a chaotic dance. The mirror trembled, the curse faltering against Elias's determined spirit. Yet even as the darkness recoiled, a lingering unease settled deep within him. The boundary between reflection and reality was thinner now than ever, and the cost of defiance remained unknown. As the final shard settled, Elias collapsed to his knees, breath ragged and heart racing. The mirror lay fractured but unbroken, its curse still alive in the shards that caught the faintest glimmers of light. Outside, the antique shop waited in silence, shadows lengthening with the coming dusk. Elias's confrontation had changed everything, but whether it was enough to escape the fate reflected beneath the skin of the mirror was a question that hung heavy in the air, unanswered and ominous. The room's stillness was shattered by a distant creak, a reminder that the mirror's eyes were always watching, always waiting. And somewhere deep in the fractured glass, the dark force stirred anew, patient and hungry for what was yet to come.